Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 12th of April 2021. Alright everyone, big weekend, lot of stuff to get through. Before I do that, I just wanted to give a quick shout out here to Bankless. I filled in for Ryan Sean Adams on Bankless's weekly roll-up kind of podcast slash video last week. So if you want to check that out, I'll link this in the YouTube description. It was pretty fun. It's about 90 minutes of David and I just talking about what happened in the previous week in crypto in general, not just Ethereum. So yeah, it was a really fun kind of thing here, and I thank the Bankless guys for having me on there. And yeah, as I said, you can go check this out in the YouTube description. So a new all-time high for ETH. I think we had two since the last time I kind of did the refuel, if I'm remembering correctly. So the new all-time high I think is 21.99 on the dot there. That's what I saw on Coinbase Pro. And you know, I guess at this point it's just kind of like, okay, well, cool. You know, another all-time high, and then ETH likes to do this thing where it gets to all-time high and then just dumps off it, right? Doesn't keep going. It just like dumps below it, and that's just kind of how ETH's always kind of been, or at least as far as I can remember, being over the last few months, which is fine, I think. And obviously the market is very hot in general right now. It's really funny because when you actually look at the wider market and what is hot and what's not right now, the ETH kind of, I guess, market is kind of quiet right now, right? Like not just ETH the asset, but like the Ethereum ecosystem itself. Like it's really wild to see the Ethereum based DeFi projects, their tokens have just been quite trending quite sideways or down for, I guess, the last couple of months. And then you look at the wider ecosystem and you see like just all these things kind of just like going up ridiculous amounts in value, and it's crazy. And I really think that when you kind of look at this stuff, it's always funny because I've written about this before in the newsletter. But basically, there's this thing that I call a sentiment pendulum, where the pendulum will kind of like swing, it'll swing like back and forth, from time to time. But in crypto, you see this play out in the markets a lot where, one sector of the market will be kind of like, trending sideways or going down or something. And everyone will be like, oh, it's dead. It's going to zero. Like, it's finished, right? Like I got to sell now. I got to get out of this position. And we saw this play out after DeFi summer last year. If you remember, even YFI went down from like, whatever it was, 45K to like 7K in like a month, right? And then it just reversed immediately from when it got to 7K, and it like went up to I think maybe 20K or something in like a couple of days. So the markets are very hot, very frothy, and now I think we're seeing that play out with kind of these other things. Obviously, there's a lot of retail investors coming in, right? Their kind of first exposure to this space, or at least not just retail users, but new users in general, their first kind of exposure is centralized exchanges, right? So obviously Coinbase is the largest in the US, and a lot of people are kind of going on there, but I think Binance has a pretty good kind of coverage now of different countries. Obviously, they've blocked out the US because of the fact that they're not allowed to service US customers. They have Binance US, which the volumes are okay, but they're nothing kind of like special. I was looking at it last night. I think they do like $600 million of 24-hour volume, and for reference, I'm pretty sure the normal Binance site does tens of billions of dollars of 24-hour volume last time I checked. So yeah, it's a pretty big kind of discrepancy there. But if we kind of look at like all the, I guess, tokens that have been going up a lot in value, it's just wild to see. Like a lot of them are just these tokens that haven't hit their all-time highs yet, and they're from like the 2017 era of coins. A lot of them are dead projects and just have been just around as what people like to call like zombie projects for quite a while now. But they're going up because there's just so much froth in the markets, right? So of course, ETH is still going up and ETH is still hitting all new all-time highs, but it's not like going up a lot, for example. It's not like, posting 100% gains in like a week sort of thing. Whereas a lot of these other things kind of are. And yeah, I just think it's a function of like that pendulum. The pendulum's kind of swung to these kind of like, other things that are just going up a lot in value. And I do believe that it's going to swing back eventually, and it's going to catch people off guard, of course. Like there's a lot of people who, like to trade these markets, and they get kind of caught off guard. They're like, oh, and then they chase like pumps and things like that. And that's why, over the long term, a lot of people that trade end up worse off than they would have just holding, either like, I guess, BTC or ETH, for example. So from that perspective, I fully expect that to happen again. And, I've been seeing lately on Twitter just all these people saying, ETH's going to get flipped by, BNB, and Ethereum's going to die, Ethereum's dead, it has so much competition, blah, blah. And usually when I see those sorts of things, I kind of look at it, I'm like, okay, well, people are getting too cocky now, and the market hates cockiness. I don't know if all of you have noticed, but, for all of my times being in crypto, whenever any kind of community gets really cocky, it ends badly for them. It always does. Like, look at what happened the other day when the Bitcoin maximalists had that clubhouse room where they were celebrating that the ETH BTC ratio was under 0.03. But then it immediately reversed and is at 0.036 or something like that after that, right? So you might think that, the market's a lot bigger than these petty little things, but it's not just, I guess, the petty little things. It's a culmination of everything that happens. And the sentiment is obviously what drives a lot of these markets, because there's a lot of, retail investors that like to kind of go in and out of positions. There's a lot of leverage. So if you can trade off that sentiment and harness it, you can make a lot of money. And I think there are a lot of people that have a lot of money and a lot of big traders that do trade off of this. And they probably see, the discourse, and they're like, okay, well, people are getting too cocky now. This kind of area is overheated. I'm going to move, my profits from there into other things. So that's kind of how I see it always playing out here. And you can look at the charts, you can just look at the ratios between different ecosystems and different coins. And it kind of always, I think, plays out like that. And to be fair, talking about cockiness and different kind of ecosystems having massive egos, Ethereum enjoyed being, very dominant for a very long time. And now Ethereum has some competition, right? And competition that is kind of gaining some market share. So and that's a good thing, I think, at the end of the day. Competition is never a bad thing. But I think in general, it gets to a point where people just get way too ahead of themselves, and it's funny how that plays out. We saw it play out in 2017 too, with ETH almost flipping Bitcoin, right? And then what ended up happening was that everyone was like, well, okay, ETH's not going to flip Bitcoin. I'm going to sell my ETH here, and then I'm going to go into Bitcoin or whatever, because it was people are underexposed to it. So I think that's what's happening across the ecosystem right now in the markets. I'm not a trader myself, but I do kind of pay attention to a lot of this stuff because it's just interesting and it piques my curiosity a lot. But yeah, just lately it's been funny, and it's always funny to see the memes and everything. I'm on Twitter all the time talking about decentralization and why it matters and things like that, and people like to make fun of me for that, and that's fine. It's not like I'm just started talking about this stuff now. I mean, I've been here for a long time. I've been talking about it forever. And it's just funny to see the sentiment and kind of see, the new users versus the kind of the older users who have been here for a while, and see how that kind of changes there. But in general, I think it's, over the long term, it's fine. It's positive. People learn, people kind of get burnt. Yeah, I mean, if you actually look at it, the way a lot of people learn from these sorts of things is if they get burnt on things too, and that's how I learned. I'm not going to say that I was someone who didn't fall for pump and dumps once upon a time as well, or didn't kind of chase things that I thought were going to be big and turned out to be nothing. There was a lot of that in 2017, and it all just fizzled out, right? So I think over the long term, you see what's lasting, what has value. I'm 100% confident that Ethereum is going to, be last and have value for a very, very long time. And I'm confident that some apps in DeFi are going to do that as well. Less confident than I am as Ethereum as a platform, because the application layer is a lot more competitive. But yeah, I mean, just from that perspective, it's just easy for me to kind of sit back and be this is just a lot of noise. We'll wait, over the long term, see what sticks around, see what doesn't. And that's another thing that's really exciting about this industry, I think, is that it can change so dramatically in a matter of months. And being around to kind of witness that, is quite fun at the end of the day. So yeah, anyway, I think I'm rambling a little bit there. Just a bit of market commentary after, I guess, the crazy kind of last few weeks that we've been having across the entire crypto markets there. So another thing I've been seeing lately is a lot of people are now trying to spread this kind of FUD about layer 2s on Ethereum and are calling them insecure, right? And it's funny to see this because, as I said on this tweet here, it's pretty encouraging to see it, because we've moved from the narrative that Ethereum can't scale to the narrative that layer 2s are insecure, because now people have seen that layer 2s are real, right? There are layer 2s live on Ethereum today. They work, they're scalable. So people are like, the haters are like, wow, oh crap, we have to pivot, pivot the narrative, pivot the FUD, and now it's like layer twos are insecure, and you typically see this from competing ecosystems, and that's fine. I mean, these ecosystems have to sell narratives as well, but like obviously I'm gonna fight back against that, and a lot of people in the ecosystem are gonna fight back against that as well. But then I say here, that real progress is being made whenever the haters are moving the goalposts, and really like this has happened for everything. I mean, it's happened for ETH2. A lot of people for a long time said that ETH2 would never launch, right? And then the Beacon chain obviously launched, and then these kind of like people have said, oh well, it's not really ETH2 because the merger hasn't been done yet. It's like, well, okay, yeah, but we're going to do the merger soon, right? And then when the merger gets done, I'm sure they're going to come up with something else. It's just noise. It's so much noise. It's so much crap. It's such a useless waste of time to even like entertain these sorts of things. And the only reason I bring it up is because I want, all of you to be aware that, you spending your time with these kinds of things is just like a waste, right? It's the only positive thing is that if you can see the narrative kind of changing and the FUD pivoting, that something is going well, right? So, if the FUD stays the same, and, a lot of the times, the things that people call FUD are actually like valid criticisms. People just call it FUD because it doesn't fit their narrative. But in general, saying Ethereum can't scale was never like a valid criticism because Ethereum has always been able to scale. It's just that we didn't want to sacrifice decentralization to do that. So it took longer to get to a point where we could scale while preserving that decentralization. And it's the same argument that was lobbied at Bitcoin for a long time. And obviously, Bitcoin is scaling in certain ways, but they've kind of like, I guess, nestled into the digital gold narrative, which doesn't require massive scale, whereas Ethereum does, right? Ethereum requires massive scale because of it's an application platform. At the end of the day, it's a value settlement platform, and we don't want their fees to be really high, obviously, right? So from that point of view, just good to see this kind of progress being made here. And I'm sure this is going to continue as soon as like the layer twos kind of are alive and in a much bigger way and prove to be more secure, or at least like prove the haters that they're secure, because they aren't insecure. There are obviously properties to it that, there's always attack vectors and everything like that, but the layer twos, as a lot of you are aware of, they inherit Ethereum security because they basically rely on Ethereum for their security and for their decentralization. So from that perspective, layer twos, when constructed in the correct way, don't get me wrong, there are ways you can construct layer twos that make them insecure, but properly constructed ZK rollups and optimistic rollups and are very secure. And even like things like side chains that commit to Ethereum, like Polygon, which is actually called a commit chain because it actually doesn't inherit Ethereum's kind of validator set or its security, but what Polygon does is that it actually uses Ethereum for its staking kind of validators. So the smart contract that controls the staking lives on Ethereum, and every 30 minutes to 3 hours, the Polygon chain is committed to Ethereum. And so the state is committed so that if something was to go wrong, you could actually just like use Ethereum as like a backup, so to speak. So it's not directly kind of like, it's not like rollups, which are directly kind of reliant on Ethereum and kind of like secured directly by Ethereum. But it is a lot better than just your vanilla side chain, which just doesn't do anything on Ethereum, right? It does everything kind of on its own chain sort of thing there. So yeah, good to see this progress being made here. So speaking of, I guess, scalability in general, Instadapp has announced that they are live on Polygon here. And this is because Aave is there, so now Instadapp has a way to kind of utilize Polygon, which they basically, Instadapp gives you a way to interact with Aave on Polygon. So you can basically do refinancing between kind of like, I guess, Ethereum's layer 1 and Polygon's layer 2 kind of here. So yeah, if you are using Aave on Polygon and you want a really easy way to kind of manage your positions and kind of like, take out new positions, close positions, Instadapp's a really great tool for that. And Instadapp's obviously available on Ethereum as well here. So definitely go check them out if you haven't yet. I'm sure a lot of you have checked out Instadapp or used it before. It's a very popular app on Ethereum. And they basically give you ways to, as I said, manage your positions across Aave on Polygon, but like across many different DeFi apps on Ethereum right now, like Uniswap and Compound and things like that. And it's a very nice interface as well. So it makes it super simple to do all of this stuff, and I highly recommend going and checking it out there. So Nader from Edge and Node here, which is part of the Graph Protocol ecosystem, has put together a complete guide to full stack Ethereum development here. So this is a super deep dive introduction to building apps with Solidity, the programming language that Ethereum uses, and React, which is a kind of like non-crypto programming language here. And basically you can see like how long this guide is here. Obviously this is for developers or aspiring developers. Like this is a very kind of long intro and deep dive here, but you know, this will give you kind of like a nice getting started and kind of like building these building basically Ethereum apps here, which is really, really cool. You know, I was just reading a tweet actually before that was someone said basically, you know, it doesn't take long to learn kind of like Solidity programming. And if you do, you can make a lot of money off it too. Because if you build an app, right, that a lot of people get value out of, you know, and you don't even necessarily have to have a token. You can build lots of different apps that provide value to people and then just like take a small fee. Or you can build apps that do things with like MEV, which I'm actually going to go into in a little bit, because I know MEV has been the talk of the town over the weekend. But yeah, I mean, if you are aspiring to be a developer, this is definitely a guide that I would check out. So definitely go give this a read here. Obviously, I'm not going to go through it on the refill here. But obviously, if you're not a developer or you don't really care to be a developer, that's someone like me. This is probably not much use to you, but it doesn't matter. I think at the end of the day, the developers are where it's at, right? And we need to encourage people to become Ethereum developers, or as many people as possible to become Ethereum developers. So yeah, definitely go check this out. So Chris from MakerDAO has created this new site called l2beat.com. What this basically does is it tracks at the moment it's tracking the total value locked in layer 2s on Ethereum. Yeah, as you can see here, there's about $300 million locked. Majority of that being Loopring with 182 million, Optimism with 93 million, which is all synthetics right now. dYdX at 12.4 million, which is really great to see so soon after their launch. ZK Sync with 8 million, Aztec with 443k, and Fuel with just a couple of dollars here. But I don't think Fuel is really live in any kind of like great capacity yet. But anyway, good to see this site come out. I would love to see more metrics here, like volumes on these exchanges, right? I would love to see fees paid. I would love to see fees paid to Ethereum by the rollups and things like that. But you know, this is just the first iteration of it. Really great to see. You know, I mentioned last week how the block has their layer 2 activity dashboard as well. A lot of it is just tracking total value locked right now. As I said, I want to see volumes, right? I want to see fees paid. Like, even though the fees are small or non-existent, I still want to see that activity. And I want to see the fees paid to Ethereum's mainnet by these layer 2 solutions. And, you know, on top of that, I was discussing this in the Daily Gwei Discord channel as well. It is going to be harder to kind of know what's real and what's not on layer 2s in terms of kind of activity, because some of these layer 2s are offering free trading, right? There's no gas fees. So what you can do is you can essentially kind of just like wash trade on the chain, right? And like fake the volumes essentially. This is what we see typically on the low fee blockchains out there that kind of offer these like dirt cheap fees, and it makes sense for people to kind of, you know, fake the activity for one reason or another. I think we're going to have to find a way to kind of filter that out on layer 2s. I'm sure there are ways to filter out. You can do pattern matching and things like that, but it's definitely something that we're going to have to consider. Whereas total value locked is much harder to kind of fake here. You know, people can just deposit money into a layer 2 solution, maybe to pump a token or something like that. But, you know, I don't really think that works over the long term. Maybe it works in the short term. And, you know, there's opportunity cost to capital as well. Like if you put $100 million in Loopring, for example, because you're trying to pump the LRC token, that means you don't have that $100 million to do something else on Ethereum. So it's really not worth it at the end of the day. But yeah, interested to see how this site evolves here, and thanks to Chris for kind of making it. Speaking of layer 2s, dYdX is continuing its growth here. It did $16 million in 24-hour trading volume, I think on Saturday here, I believe so. And the current kind of 24-hour trading volume record is held by Loopring at 35 million. I think dYdX is gonna kind of break this, you know, sooner rather than later. You know, they're kind of growing pretty fast here. As I mentioned last week's refuel, they went to mainnet, so public mainnet, where, you know, I don't think there's any capital limits of people kind of I guess, is getting into dYdX right now. I may be wrong there. There may still be capital limits, but I don't think so. So yeah, it's just a matter of like adopting this thing, getting more awareness around it, and getting more people on board, especially kind of like various market makers and more ecosystem participants, which I'm sure they're going to come on board over time, and we're going to see this grow out there. So really, really great to see dYdX growing here with $16 million of 24-hour trading volume as a new record for them. So Ben Edgington put out his latest What's New in ETH2 update here. You can go check it out in the YouTube description, of course. This is the, I guess, ETH2 update Bible. It's where I get all of my ETH2 updates from. There is no better resource than this, I don't think. He basically collects all the information you need to know about like the Beacon chain, Altair, which is the first kind of hard fork going live soon for ETH2, the merge, Rayonism, which is the ETH1 to ETH2 kind of merge effort that's being done as part of the Ethereum scaling hackathon to basically get a demo or a testnet of this merger up and running with a stretch goal of sharding happening on there as well. Then a bunch of other kind of links here to what Ben likes to call the great explainers, which are educational materials, media kind of spots for ETH2 stuff, research, the calls, you know, the ETH2 calls that have been happening. I mean, there's everything you would ever want in here. So if you haven't done so yet, be sure to subscribe. There's a subscribe button up the top right here. Basically an RSS feed. And you know, if you want to check this out, you can. It'll be linked in the YouTube description below. All right, so the biggest, I guess, thing to happen over the weekend, and something that everyone has been talking about, is this concept of MEV. And you might have heard of these terms like Flashbots or PGA bots. And you might have seen that gas fees are down and got down to like the 60s over the weekend. You know, they're usually lower on the weekend, but 60s doesn't really happen very often. Now, there are a lot of people attributing this to the adoption of what's called Flashbots. Now, before I can explain to you what Flashbots is, I have to explain to you what MEV is. Now, some of you may know what it is, so I'll just give a quick kind of high-level overview here. But MEV stands for Miner Extractable Value. Now, what this is basically value that not just miners, but anyone can extract on Ethereum based on certain activity. So for example, you might have heard of a concept called front running, which basically means that when you submit a transaction, say you're submitting a trade on Uniswap and you're trading some dYdY for ETH, right? What can end up happening is that someone can front run that trade, right? And kind of like make a profit by doing so, by kind of doing a front run, doing an arbitrage transaction between different liquidity pools on Ethereum. Now, this might mean that you get a kind of like worse off price than you would have got, maybe only by like a little amount, but your transaction is still going to go through and everything, and that's going to be fine. But the reason it's called kind of MEV and miner extractable value is because the miners have a very big advantage here. Now, why do they have advantage with MEV? Well, because miners control the transaction ordering in a block. So every transaction that ever gets kind of done in Ethereum goes into what's called the mempool. Now, the mempool is like the waiting area before your transaction gets included in a block. So you might know that an Ethereum block happens every 15 seconds, and when you see that your transaction is pending, it's waiting to go into an Ethereum block. Now, if you paid the rapid gas transaction fee, you'll be there's a high chance that you're going to be in the next Ethereum block, essentially. So in 15 seconds or less, your transaction is going to be included, and there you go, it's done. Now, if you pay like a lower gas fee, it might take a couple blocks to get in, but eventually it's going to go in, right? Unless you pay like a really small fee and you're kind of stuck, and then you have to do that speed up mechanism that you see in MetaMask when you press the speed up button to pay a higher gas fee. But essentially, that's what happens now. Now, because the miners can control the transaction ordering in a block, and because the miners don't have to necessarily only include transactions that include a fee attached to them, what they can do is they can include zero fee transactions. So they can basically put in their own transaction at the front of the line. So they can basically skip through everyone else and basically say, oh, well, I don't care that this person's paying much higher gas fees than anyone else, right? I'm going to put my transaction at basically at the front of the queue, and it's going to be the first one that gets included in a block, and I'm going to pay zero fees for it. So obviously that's a very powerful ability to have. Now that you kind of understand how MEV works at a high level, you can basically begin to understand how Flashbots works. Now, what Flashbots is, it's basically an initiative or a piece of software that was created. It's open source and everything like that, but it was created to democratize MEV, or at least that's how it's being sold. Now, what this means is it basically gives anyone an opportunity to have direct access to mining pools to basically get access to these zero fee arbitrage opportunities, or these zero fee kind of MEV opportunities, or front running sandwich attacks. You might have heard of all these kind of things before. Now, what this means is that instead of paying gas fees directly on the Ethereum network and participating in what's called priority gas auctions, or participating in the normal kind of transaction flow where you have to outbid other people to get your transaction included, what Flashbots allows you to do, it is essentially allows you to bribe the miner outside of the mempool to include your transaction. So the flow would look like this. You find an MEV opportunity on Ethereum. You think, wow, okay, I'm going to exploit that because I'm going to make X amount of dollars if this succeeds. And I'm going to do this by, harnessing Flashbots, which means I'm going to submit my transaction to Flashbots. They're going to submit that, and then I'm going to pay kind of like a kind of bribe on top of that to this miner. And then the miner is going to include this transaction into a block for zero gas fees, right? Or the mining pool will include the transaction for zero gas fees. Now, you might have come to the realization by now that this is why gas fees are trending lower, because now all the people that were doing MEV on kind of, I guess, like the Ethereum mempool, because they were in the same kind of transaction waiting pool that everyone else was, they were having to do these things called, with PGA bots, they were having to do priority gas auctions. They were having to compete against everyone. Now, they don't have to compete based on gas price anymore. They basically, I would assume they compete based on the bribe that they pay to the miners. So what ends up happening now is you have two transaction waiting pools. You have the one that Flashbots has, right, which is the zero gas fee, bribe the miner, get your transaction included. And then you have the mempool, which is where all the regular users are. Now, I think, we don't know if this is like a net positive overall, right? MEV can be toxic. I don't think, I think long term we need a better way of solving MEV than quote unquote democratizing it. But I've explained on the refill before that MEV is actually very, very hard to solve for, because the way you would solve it is that you would randomize the order that the transactions get included in a block, right? You would take away the ability for miners or even stakers to order transactions, and you would randomize it. Now, I don't know why this isn't possible today. I'm not smart enough. I haven't looked into it enough. But as far as I know, it is not possible to do that today in a provably random way where it couldn't be gamed. There are obviously people working on this. It is something that I think, cryptographic researchers like Justin Drake expect to be solved eventually. And there's a bunch of other researchers working on this. I mean, solving MEV is one of the hardest research problems in the space right now. So obviously it's going to attract some of the smartest minds in the space. But in the meantime, we have Flashbots, which basically allows, all of this to happen. Now, if you want on-chain proof of this happening, you can see here from Alex from Nansen here. He basically posted this chart that shows the percentage of blocks with at least one zero gas price transaction in them. Now, this has obviously skyrocketed during kind of like the last few I guess, like weeks. I mean, even just the last couple of weeks, it skyrocketed in April from about 5% up to 35%, if I'm just eyeing the chart here correctly. Now, the reason why I think this has finally taken off is Flashbots is relatively new. It's only been around, I think, since maybe February or March. But on top of this, if you kind of like think about what happened with EIP 1559 and miners being like, wow, okay, 1559 is going to cut into our revenue because it's burning a portion of fees. And then people telling them, well, just look at MEV, right? Just look at all the opportunities within MEV and you can make some extra revenue from that. I think that's what's happened. The miners are finally kind of using this MEV. Apparently, like 60% of all the hash rate is now, plugged into Flashbots, which means that, this is kind of the effect that we're seeing play out here. So the TLDR here and the net effect is that, yes, gas fees are going to be lower now, or at least until activity picks up again and kind of like the gas fees just trend higher in general again. But, that's why the gas fees have been lower. At least that is the, I guess, like, it's still, I mean, it's a theory, but there is like very hard evidence behind it. But it's still like just it's a theory with evidence, but still no one's 100% sure. But it's highly likely that this is the reason. And this is only going to continue. MEV and the amount of value that can be extracted by MEV is absolutely massive. And that value just comes from the fact that there's a lot of fragmented liquidity pools on Ethereum. Like, you think about it, Uniswap has its own liquidity pools, SushiSwap has its own liquidity pools, Curve has its own liquidity pools. So any kind of arbitrage transactions between those can be front run, can be sandwiched, can be, basically MEV'd as much as you want. Now, people can do this using Flashbots, and it can be done in a quote-unquote more democratic way. It can be done in a way that is not totally parasitic to users by essentially, I guess, bidding up the transaction fees really, really high. I'm really, really curious to see what happens with the transaction fees now when, say the ETH price drops like, rapidly in a day. Say it drops like 20% in a day. And we get those that classic like spike in gas fees, so like 1,000 Gwei, because everyone's trying to do arbitrage and everyone's trying to save their positions from liquidation, and everyone's trying to liquidate everyone else. Will we get like a much less of a spike in gas fees because of the fact that the Flashbot stuff is here? I think so. And then, if it doesn't happen, and then by the time 1559 is implemented, then I think it's even more true, because what 1559 does is it kind of like smooths out the fees in general as well. So, Flashbots coupled with 1559 means that users are going to enjoy a cheaper kind of transaction experience on layer 1, and they're also going to enjoy a kind of better experience with gas fee user kind of experience and user kind of interface here. So yeah, that's the story of MEV and Flashbots. There's a lot more to it than that. I know a lot of people are still confused by it. I'm not going to say I'm an expert on it by any means, but that's the high level of how I understand, how MEV works and how what MEV is, and how Flashbots works within that realm there. You'll be seeing a lot more people talk about this. All the galaxy brains within the ecosystem are working on it. And if you want to get involved, there are plenty of ways to do so. If you just Google like MEV or Flashbots, it's all open source, it's all open research. You can get involved if you're someone who likes to tackle hard problems within the crypto ecosystem. And speaking of MEV as well, there was a really great thread from Robert Miller here on basically what sandwich attacks are and how to take money from the sandwich bots. So apparently Robert here spotted that someone was able to take 100 ETH from sandwich bots. Then a second person was able to jump in and make an extra 300 ETH by exploiting other sandwich bots here. Now, I'm not going to read out this whole thread. It's a longish thread and it gets a little bit technical, but I highly recommend going and reading it because it's a wild story. I mean, sandwich bots are just absolutely kind of wild here, and they're true to their name. If you think about it, a sandwich, basically the kind of like end user gets stuck in the middle, and then the sandwich bots kind of like close in on it, and it's kind of like it's a form of MEV. It definitely extracts value here, but I'm not going to do it justice by explaining it on the refuel. So definitely go check out this thread from Robert here if you want to learn more about that one. All right, to finish up here, I wanted to kind of discuss Uniswap and why them going to layer 2 will be a game changer for the entire industry. I wrote about this in the newsletter today. You can go check that out if you want to read my long form thoughts, but I'll give a TLDR here. So I put out like a tweet here where I basically said, and gave my reasons why I think it's going to be a game changer. Uniswap has already confirmed they'll be deploying on Optimism's L2. Now, this could happen as early as May, shortly after the V3 release goes live. It doesn't have to wait until July, until Optimism goes live with a public mainnet, because they can go, Uniswap can go live on Optimism's private mainnet all the same. Now, it's a big deal because no other app has the brand awareness that Uniswap has by far. I mean, if you kind of think about it, pretty much like anyone's kind of first interaction with Ethereum DeFi is Uniswap, because Uniswap is where you exchange things, right? And Uniswap is the most popular app, has the most brand awareness, as I mentioned. Now, Uniswap also accounts for 60% of all decentralized exchange volume on Ethereum. Still, like if you look at the chart, it's actually pretty insane that Uniswap has still been able to retain that market share, and that's simply because of the network effects it has around it. It's huge. And I also believe that this will show off the power of layer 2 on Ethereum. There's going to be so many more people that look at this and they're going to see, wow, Ethereum can scale? Wow, holy crap. Like, I didn't realize that you could do this on Ethereum. And they're going to realize the power of layer 2. And I know there's other solutions already live. I know Loopring exists. I know Diversify exists. I know dYdX exists, obviously. But they are not anywhere near as big as Uniswap. Like, that's just the truth of the matter. As you can see, Uniswap has 60% of the DEX volume still. And because of that, they're going to be able to bootstrap an ecosystem on layer 2 probably faster than any other app can. And wherever Uniswap goes, I think a lot of the other apps are going to go as well. So, obviously Uniswap has confirmed they're going to be on Optimism. I think, I don't think it's just going to be Optimism and that's it. I think other solutions are going to exist and there'll be bridges between it. But obviously Optimism is going to play a very important role here because of Uniswap. And Uniswap is a leader in this ecosystem, or at least one of the leaders, if not the leader. Even though it's not the biggest app by total value locked, it is the biggest app by brand awareness by far and by number of unique users by far as well. So yeah, those are just some thoughts there. As I said, it's in today's Daily Gwei newsletter if you want to go read some more thoughts about that. All right, everyone, thank you again for listening and watching. That's it for today. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, give that video a thumbs up, join the Discord channel, subscribe to the newsletter, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.